Okay, Christine, the stream is live now. Max is going to be your TA for this class.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Good morning and welcome to our class. I'll wait just a minute for everybody else to roll on into class. And in our chat today, we have Max. In case you have any questions, you can put them in there. In general, I don't mind if people unmute to ask me a question while I'm teaching. That way I can answer it right away. Just remember to mute yourself again in case there is any background noise. So I am going to start sharing my screen. Everybody should see my first slide, which is the class title today, Basic Drawing Nature Inspired. Can everybody see that? Yes, I see a shaking head from Leona. Thank you, Leona. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good, great, thank you. All right, sounds good, because I also asked that because once in a while people have something wrong with their computer and then they think it's me, but if everybody else is in consensus that things are rolling along smoothly, then that's good. That means my stuff is working. So welcome. I'm glad you chose to join me today for this hour. As I said, the title is Basic Drawing Nature Inspired, and we're going to look at how you can use some basic shapes to help your drawing abilities. And I came up with this class when one of the learners said they really would appreciate something like this because they didn't think they could draw at all. So this was my attempt to help everybody know that they can draw with just some simple kinds of pointers. So in case you haven't had me before, my name is Christine Hess. Welcome to anybody new here. We are being streamed live today on the Get Set Up site. So welcome to everybody that's watching through there. If you have had me before, you know I do some of the art classes. I live in South Central Pennsylvania near Harrisburg, the capital. My background is in art education, and then I went on for more studies in training and development. And for 38 years, I worked in healthcare, and I taught the kids and did some art therapy with them on pediatrics for 24 years. And then I oversaw the patient education program for our organization. But I also have done a lot of things on the side, such as had an antique business with my son, and I've been very active in environmental issues. I love that I get to have live interaction here with the adults on Get Set Up, and that I can share my passions which include art often, and have fun with you. So I appreciate that you are sharing faces with me, and we can talk to each other. If anybody wants to share their streaming faces, just scroll down to your bottom left-hand corner and you'll see a little video camera that says start the video, and then I can see you. So if you would like a recording of the class that's being done today, you can email help@getsetup.io. And remember that if you are joining us by live stream, the best way to participate is to actually register for a class, and then you get to be part of the live interaction. And remember that Get Set Up is not paid to promote any specific products. So as I said, I don't mind if you ask questions as we go along. If you do put them in the chat, either I'll try to look and see if I see anything, or Max will let me know. So our agenda today includes what we're going to cover, and that is we're going to talk about some inspirations for drawing that is found in nature, which is my favorite place to find inspiration, and how you can use some simple shapes to draw objects found in nature. And then we're going to practice using examples to draw your own nature-inspired art. So if you brought along a pencil and paper, that's great. If you didn't, I'm going to send you a lot of links to what we're looking at so that you can practice at home and do some homework. So don't feel you have to do it now, but if you like to do it while we're talking about it, that's kind of how I do some things too. You can do that too. And then we'll wrap everything up. So let's start by talking about supplies you need to do some basic sketching. And if you're already into art and you've been doing it a while, you probably have all these on hand. Like me, you probably have more than enough because you've accumulated it throughout the years. So I'm just going to review some of those basic things that are a good thing to have on hand. And paper sketchbook is definitely the first thing you're going to need. I tell my groups of learners, I tend to go for just inexpensive sketchbooks because then I feel more free to scribble and sketch and not worry about mistakes, and it keeps me looser. I did buy like one time a really expensive sketchbook, and I saved it on the shelf for when I was going to have the perfect sketch. You know, I didn't want to mess it up and waste the pages. And it sat there a long, long time, and I just like it held me back from using it. So I learned not to really get high-end sketchbooks. I prefer just sometimes even to take a sheet of watercolor paper, the big stuff that you can buy that's poster size, and cut that into squares to use. You know, that's another thing. You can get them fairly inexpensively. And then when you turn it into multiple smaller sizes, you have a lot to use. I also got my one sketchbook I'm going to show you at Walmart, and it was like $5. So, and also there's other places where you can find inexpensive but higher quality supplies, such as Tuesday Morning. We have a place called Ross, which is similar to Marshall's. We have Christmas tree shops. Sometimes they have some good things there. We have a bargain outlet, Ollie's, and that's for things that they buy off bankrupt sites or fell off a truck things. So they have a really nice aisle with some art supplies in. So those kinds of places, you know, if it helps you to bargain hunt, you can look in those places. So then you need a pencil and a pen, and with the pencil, you'll probably use an eraser at some point. I try not to get too caught up in being perfecting, like with my pencil and make it perfect, that then, you know, I feel like, oh, well, now what am I going to do next? So unless you really like to use only pencils, some people do beautiful sketches and artwork with only pencils. I usually use my pencil for the foundation and then put my pen and ink on top of it. So that's just how I work. You may have a different way of doing it. So in that case, I use my eraser to like maybe erase some of the foundation lines that you would see and are sticking out and noticeable. My pen, my go-to ink pen is a permanent black Sharpie. a fine point, not the broad ones, because the broad ones tend to bleed more and all, but the fine point really has a nice fine point one. I can get them at Dollar Tree stores for $1 and they work fine. I also have some uni pens and the other high-end microns, but I still grab my Sharpie for using it for doing what I do most. So whatever permanent black ink marker you may have should work good for you. And that's just so that it doesn't bleed. And if you add any color like watercolor paints onto it, it won't make it bleed. My eraser I have is one of those little like pen type cartridge erasers. I like that because it's very controllable. I got that at a dollar store too. And then adding color. You can use almost anything you want, but these are my go-to things. I have colored pencils. I do have magic markers, but they're very bold and bright in colors and not as subtle and controllable. And I don't have the very expensive alcohol-based ones, so I don't use them too often. Pastels, I really don't use them just because of the smearing thing, but if you'd like to try and fool around with maybe like black paper, you could use chalk pastel or oil pastel and try that. And like I said, for paint, my favorite is watercolor paints because I try to keep these sketches quick and flowing, and watercolors, I just put them down and let them dry. So if you have any other resource to share, you can put that in the chat for people and just maybe say what part of the country you're in, because I know my East Coast things, and when I talk about Ross, I don't think they have that in the West or in Midwest. So talk about where you are if you suggest a place to get good supplies. Oh, and the other place would be online supplies. And I do have people say they use the Cheap Joe's. I've gotten things through Dick Blick. So there are online sources. And of course, then you have the other craft specialty places like Michael's, Hobby Lobby. They have art supply areas that you can get things in their stores too. Any questions about supplies? Okay, then we'll go to the theme, which I look at as being just a wonderful place to be and get lots of inspiration, and that's nature-inspired art. So remember, we're going to really gear this towards how you can look at these subjects and draw them. And the breakdown in looking at what you're seeing is to see the shapes. Try to go filter out all the details and the very overwhelming things you think you have to do to make it look exactly like that, and think about the shapes. So I chose these two examples right here so that you do get to see a little bit of the shapes. Now this first drawing here, painting actually, they might have used some pencil for the background basis shape, and then they did right away with the watercolor paint, put the color down. So I usually use pen and ink in between there before I put color down, but I wanted you to see in here these shapes. So this heart is really this tree is almost like an inverted heart shape. So you should be able to see that. And then there you have the trunk. And this tree is more like an oval. And then this one has more of a triangular shape. So that's what I mean about seeing some basic shapes. Over here, this landscape is much more kind of complicated in how many layers there are. But if you break it down by looking at the shapes, you should be able to see that if you were looking at this out in nature, you'd be able to kind of extrapolate these shapes, pull them out, and do some divisions and rounded areas, ovals. These areas here that are more like strips that give you the basis for where you're going to add the details. The fields are almost like a quilt with rectangles in there, and there is some perspective in there, but nothing too complicated. And then coming forward, you have more rounded areas, kind of sweeping arches. So that's what I'm talking about, picking out your main shapes so that then you have that to build up the details that you want to add on top of it. That just gives you some organization, some proportions that you want to try. So those are the things I look at when I'm going to be trying to get something done, you know, that looks similar to what I'm looking at. Now we'll go on to animals, because when you leave the landscapes and the trees and those things, I want to talk a little bit about animals. They still have very similar shapes. So here again, these are pictures I did in a very small 4x6 sketchbook that I got at Walmart. And again, when I was looking at these pictures, which I looked at photographs, I tried to break it down into some simple shapes that I could then expand upon and make more detail. So the one on the right is my niece's cat, Minerva, and I had a photograph on my iPad. And really what I did was kind of look for the proportions and got some shapes out of her here. The oval for her body, the circular head, triangles for the ears, and usually on animals, you'll find appendages, their legs and things have sort of a blocky shape to them. And then her rear leg has like an oval shape to it. So those are just some of the basic shapes for the cat. And I would put that down in pencil, and then I used my pen and ink to go around there and give it a little more detail with the scribbled outline and some scribbled details on the middle. And then on the turtle, again, it's an oval shell with an oval head and the appendages that are almost like rectangles with just another little end on them. So that's what I give myself for the turtle. And then I worked forward with some details. And I do often grab my pen and ink quicker than do too much with my pencil. I just like using my pen and ink and go in there and trying to be more, you know, loose and free with sketching that. So that's the way I prefer. If you wanted to do more in pencil on that, you could do that too. Questions on any of those two things? The trees and landscapes and the animals. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through some birds too, and we're actually going to look at a how to draw a bird video so that you get a feel for that. So I kind of am working my way up into a little more complicated things from the nature. You know, all of these have a little bit more layers and parts to them, but birds, most songbirds, and that's what we're going to look at for the video, have very similar body shapes. So a songbird, once you draw one songbird, you can make it almost any other songbird because you just change colors and details on it. But these birds I chose because they're different than a songbird, but I wanted you to see they still have body parts that are shapes. So this is a great blue heron. They're very large. His main body part is an oval, and then his tail area is a rectangle. And yes, the neck is different than most birds because it's more like a snake, but it's long, stretched out, and it's rectangular. And then there's a small oval for the head and a triangle for the beak. And the puffin has a very oval body here where the feathers for the wings and the tail come out of with triangles. And the head is a round circle with a triangular beak. So I think you can see that's a pretty obvious simplified shape type bird. So they're both in the smaller sketchbook, about 4x6. And I did some of that pencil shapes, and then I got my pen out and I did the pen outline, a few details before I then got my watercolors out and filled in with color. I do these quickly because I found that, you know, the looser I am and the freer flowing with my sketches and color, it just gives it more of a nice kind of artistic, impressionistic kind of feel to it instead of realism. I'm not out to be very realistic here. So yes, maybe the kingfisher over here looks a little more getting into that realism, picture quality interpretation, but that is larger. I think it's 11x8, 11x7. And so I did put more time into the painting of it with the strokes and the details on the little pine tree here and the feathers. So it's similar though, in that I still use the pencil to give myself the round body shape, the rectangle neck, and the oval head with a triangular beak, which is a strange beak because they catch fish. But I still used, and the triangles in the base, I still used those shapes to give me the foundation for what I was going to put on top of there with the feathers and the details. And that really helps the proportions so that the kingfisher looks like a kingfisher, because they're very unique in the parts of their bird bodies that they have. And then I probably put more time into this, maybe a few hours painting it, and I framed it for a friend. So it has a little more detail than these two types of quick sketches I do, but I still start with basic body shapes. Questions? And I did use pen and ink in that too. It's harder to see because it's a distant shot from it, but I used some pen and ink for the outlines and then the watercolor. And someone in my last class about this did ask, do I always do it in that order? Most often I do. I do pencil, pen and ink, and then watercolor. There's some people who prefer doing pencil, watercolor, and then adding some pen and ink. It's up to you. But when I looked into it to see which way most artists do it, I think the majority do it the way I'm saying. It's kind of like they give themselves those little details and outlines with the pen, and then they put the watercolor in. And if they have to go back in and add any pen, sometimes the white, like over here, I think I used a little bit of white pen ink there. They do that too, but it's just what you prefer. You can do it either way. So someone's asking about the brand of watercolors I use, and I bought myself a set that's a higher end through Dick Blick. It's called Koi, K-O-I, and it's a really nice transportable fold over one. The watercolor little blocks are very high quality, very pure pigment. So I think it was 20 some dollars, I forget, but it was one of those things I felt I could splurge on because I knew I'd use it a long time. I had watched an artist use it for her journals she does, and I liked it a lot. So, and it fit into my travel bag really nice. So that's what I use. My friend got the Winsor Newton set that's similar. She loves hers. They're talked about very highly too. But they're the palettes that have the hard blocks in. I do have watercolor tubes. I hardly ever use them. The only thing I've used them for is to make my own little transportable packs. So there was, if you look it up on YouTube, you can look at make your own watercolor box, like for travel, and they take Altoid metal cases or vitamin bins, something, and they squeeze those watercolor tube colors into it and let it harden so that you're getting the hard block effect, and then you can use water with it to, you know, make your watercolor. So that's the only way I've used. Now, when I was in college, we did use tube watercolors and play around with them more than the hard cake ones, but I like for traveling and how I use my watercolors, I like the hard set. So here is some really simplistic starting point for looking at and thinking about shapes becoming other things. And this is what a lot of kids go out to investigate. And you can get books for children all about this, kind of looking at how shapes become other things. And this is a guy that I have some of his books. I bought it for my daughter, and he's just a wonderful artist who shows children or adults, if you like that, Ed Emberley's Drawing Book of Animals. And he takes all these cute, more cartoonish things, animals, and shows you how you can break them down into shapes and then make them. And I thought that was something in case you want to look at books on Amazon. There's many how-to draw books. So this one here just shows, you know, you start with very simple shapes, a circle, and it becomes a snail. The bee has the 3 body parts, and it becomes a bee with the wings and the legs and the antennas. The spider has 2 round, circular, or oval parts for the body. Add the legs, and it becomes a spider. And then the butterfly has the thorax, middle, head, and wings. And it could be a dragonfly or butterfly. But that's even when you work yourself up into more complicated things. So here we're going to get a little more involved with understanding shapes, and trees are part of the nature and landscape. So these trees I found if you Google things like, that's another good place to look for things. So if you Google something like how to draw a butterfly, we'll go there. And then you look at images. You could choose videos. A lot of the videos will be YouTube videos, but I like to look at images first because it's more static and you can watch it and look at it like something in front of you that you might want to try. And a lot of times you'll get even tutorials. So here's like a very more involved tutorial for how to draw this butterfly. And some of them are for children, but you know what, it works fine for us too. So here's one that walks you through all about how to draw a butterfly. So Google whatever it is you want to draw, and it's a really good resource to look at tutorials and see things. And when I did how to draw a tree, I found these, and I picked them out because they are very simplistic trees, and in the black ink, which is more pronounced probably than you would do in a finished picture, but these are architectural renderings that architects use when they do plans for houses and they're showing the house they design. These are there to imply the landscaping. And so, if your drawings were started, you'd be using pencil most likely where those black lines are. And then on top of there, you could do some pen and ink and some color for watercolor. But I liked it because it really shows you how to look at a tree and see the shapes that are there. And then you use that shape to decide what details you're going to put into it. And there's many different shapes there. This was how to draw a poppy flower from, like I said, a Google link to how to draw flowers I found. So here, while we're talking about trees, I did put this video together, and I want you to think about it like I'm using my pencil, and then I'm going to my pen and ink to draw some simple trees. And this is one that you can try to draw along with me if you want, because it's a nice little simple practice. So I do the first one with a trunk, and then I come up with a shape like that first tree I showed you of an inverted heart. So that would be my pencil basis, simple, nothing elaborate. And then the second one, I want to look different. So I'm going to do a trunk, but this time I'm going to make it more rectangular. Now you notice I don't do the really squared off ones like those architects did for theirs. You could if you wanted, but I like to give myself some wavy outlines, because when you look at the trees outside, which I can see through my window, they're very irregular edges to it. It's nothing too boxy. So I did this one with some irregular edges in the shape of a rectangle. And then the last one, because it only fits in a small space, I did the trunk, and then I did the more triangular shape here, long, skinny, stretched out triangle. So those are just my basic pencil shapes. Now I'm going to pick my pen up, and that's how I start to add details, is with my pen. So I'm going to be a little more detailed with the trunk and put some branches in there so it really looks like a trunk. Then for the outline of the leaves, I'm going to make it look like leaves kind of do if you're in the distance, more rounded and irregular shapes. But when you do it and you follow your outline, you start to see, you have that shape of a realistic looking tree. And then as you add these little mounds of still scribbles, as I call them, rounded scribbles, you start to give the impression that there's bunches of leaves sticking out more. It creates a little more 3D effect to it. And when you do some of these, it maybe looks like there's holes with light coming through. So it's very, very simple things, but it makes it look differently just because of the details you then start to incorporate. And you could go further and make this more detailed, but this is usually about what I do with pen and ink before I get my watercolors out to add some color for the leaves. So the next one, I'm going to make the trunk a little thicker, and I'm going to use that rectangular shape. And instead of rounded edges, I'm making them more sharp, more kind of rough. And I just start scribbling. So the scribbling is just going to give you a different feel for what type of leaves and shape of the tree is being filled in. And I use that rectangle to follow it for some guidance, and I just keep scribbling. So that's what I mean about using my pen and ink. I like to be loose with it and kind of sketch with it more than my pencil. So you can see the more I go back and forth over the lines, it starts to make the leaves look more full in there or more deep with dark contrast. And then the light areas look like they're sticking out more. So that's just by scribbling, and none of those shapes did I ever draw a leaf. I'm just doing overlapping scribbles that give you the impression of the leaves in that tree. And that tree looks very different than the first tree just by those simple little changes. I'm going to add a few little branches sticking through, kind of rough. Again, you could do more detail if you wanted, but as I said, I like to do my details more, by adding some color to it. So that's my second tree. Very different than the first tree, very quickly done, very sketcherly is a word I use to say it. And so the last tree I'm trying to make different again. In my mind, I'm trying to be different. So I give it a straight trunk. And this time I make the pattern of the leaves point downward, still a back and forth kind of scribble. And as I do this in my brain, all of a sudden it looks like a pine tree. And then as I make some of those branches jagged sticking out, in my mind, I start thinking this looks like it has snow on it by the way I'm doing it. So that's what I decided is a pine tree with some snow on it. Simple, just a different effect. And you can see each of those has their own feel to them just because there were little bits of difference done with the pen details. So then I put some marks on the trunk and then I ground them. I put some ground there, and each of these I try to make a little different too. So that one's sort of like just dirt. This one's some grass effect to it. And then the last one, remember I said I felt like that was snow. So I kind of think, all right, I'll make it look like there's some snow there. And that's the 3 different trees. So I think all of you could probably do that. And I will send you a link to this so that you can keep going with it or do it again, whatever you want. These links to the videos will be included. Any questions for that? Okay, so if I wanted to paint, I'd probably do this one, lots of greens, dark greens, light greens. This one I might make fall colors, oranges. I like to make them different. And then this one would be a lot of white with just some green peeking through where the branches are. So that's just how you can make things look, different in a simple way. So this is the other hint and practice I tell my learners to do. When you're outside, either walking or sitting around, or even if you want to try it now, when you look at the trees out there or the buildings, squint your eyes because that helps to get rid of the details. So I used to get so caught up in trying to draw the leaves and the branches and get to the details before I even thought about the bigger picture of the simple shape. So by squinting your eyes, you see the shapes and the contrasts, and that gets rid of those details so that you can just concentrate on making the first simple shapes on your paper before you build it up. So it's a nice little thing to try to practice even when you're outside taking a walk or whatever. And it really does help to break it down and to see those shapes. Any questions? Okay, so here's just some more references for you to see about shapes with nature. The one on the left is a leaf painting I did a few years ago. And the one on the right is just a clip I found from a coloring book page more recently. So I thought it was interesting, these are basic, simple shapes you could find in a coloring book. And yet, if you look at my picture, it almost looks like I used some of them, which I didn't. I really looked at leaves and I pulled those shapes out of them. But I did pencil for those very simple shapes. And then I went over it with pen and ink. And then the most detail is added because of the watercolors I did. And I did a few layers. So like here, this yellow with pale yellow with the darker on top. Same with the golds and the greens. My lollipop tree is truly just a stick with a circle on it. and very little pen and ink there. There's mounds of bushes that are just kind of scribbled mounds and some grass. And then I added the colors with my watercolor. The trees in the middle, I picked out also when I found that Google, how to draw trees thing. It was, again, something that I think architects use, but I liked it because it shows you all the different shapes you should be able to find in nature with trees. So this one, this columnar one, looks almost like the one I did in my practice. And then you have ones that are more like triangles and rounded forms. Here, this one has some openings in it, but each section is almost like an oval. So there you can find so many different shapes by looking at trees. That's a good place to kind of practice doing that squinting and breaking it down so you see their shapes. Also the buildings, like across the street, there's a roof and a boxy bottom to the house. If I squint, I can see them very easily, and those darks and lights stand out to me. So we're going to look at drawing some birds now. And this is a basic little sketch I did of a songbird. So this is what I said about songbirds having very similar bodies. I could make him blue, I could make him yellow, I could make him red, and he changes what kind of bird he is by the color I put on him. But what I did here was use some pencil, and then I went over with my ink, and then I took my red pencil and circled the areas so that you could see what I used for my basic bird body to give me proportions. And that is almost always what you're going to be using in songbirds, are these shapes. That's why I have these shapes broken down here for you: circle, triangle, rectangle, or a teardrop. Those are very simplistic ways to look at a bird, and then you use them to build out your details. So the base area where the tail is usually fits and flows from the round body. Yeah, and my wing is a little messed up, but I didn't even care about that. I was just playing around to show you bird shapes for the body. So here's a YouTube video. I told you I'm going to send you this link. It's pretty long, so we're not going to watch the whole thing, but I wanted you to get a sense of how this guy helps you to break it down into drawing a bird. And he uses colored pencils, and he does start with pencil and then goes to ink. I will send you this link so that you can practice it at home. As I said, we're just going to start to watch it. I'll let you see the very first steps he goes through. He's much more precise and meticulous than I tend to. I tend to try to be looser and just put that circle down. He's showing you how to make it a proportional circle by giving you some lines to connect. And that's the body. And then he's going to do the same thing with the head. So he even tells you here in words, guidance for what he's showing you. And he does say he's trying to help you. In case you say, I can't draw a circle, this is how you draw a circle fairly evenly. But he puts a lot more time and effort into his pencil part than I do. I use my pencil just for the basics, and then I go to my pen. In his head, he's dividing it into sections so that you can see where the beak comes into play and where the eyeball would be. So that, again, is helping you with the proportions, so it's going to look like a bird. And then here he shows you how you connect the head to the body, and that's where the feather lines will be. So he's giving you some really clear direction for how to make this body look like a bird. And this is the base where those tail feathers come out of. I tend to just do more like a quick triangle, but he's really giving you the rump features. Often I'll do like this whole thing as an oval instead of a circle with the base on it. But then he's showing you where the feet come out of the body, usually for proportions. That's where they are, and how the tail then flows and connects onto the whole bird body. So it's good. He's really breaking it down almost anatomically for this bird body, that you can see how it should look so that it's realistically like a bird. Now he gets more involved with the eyeball and the feet and the beak with his pencil. I give myself, like for the eye, I do that, a circle. He's going to get very detailed. I like to do the details with my pen. So I'm going to start going through some of this, but he does all that with the pencil. And I think it's because he's going to use colored pencil with it. So actually the pencil will blend in with his colored pencil. And he does use pen and ink to go over some of it. To me, it seems like he erases some important lines that he's really putting time into drawing. So he gets very sketchy with his pencil, but then he erases it when after he puts the pen and ink in. So as I said, now he's doing some of the effects of, the feathers more sketchy. And here he's showing you how the wing goes into the body. And as I said, you'll have this to look at later. Instead of trying to do the whole thing now, this is just to give you some of the idea of how it can be used. And once you have a bird body, you can change the colors. And this guy also gives other tutorials. So once you have his link, you'll see other ones to how he draws other things. So here he's going to do the feet and get more detailed with them. I tend to do mine a little quicker and not so detailed. He does it's a very nice job, and I think you can follow this and even do the same thing. So once he has some of those main things done with his pencil, then he's going to pick up his pen with the permanent black marker to use it and do the bird. So he's using a micron, and you can see he kind of does it. He did speed it up, but he's going real fast over top of his pencil, and not as many details with the lines. So you can see like he skipped some of those lines. Now he's erasing everything so that the only thing he has there is the pen and ink. So I feel like he put some pencil time in there that he wasted. He didn't use them. Now he's adding the color, and this is where it becomes a bluebird. And this is how you can either change it to another color, you can add watercolor. He just shows adding the color to make it with his colored pencils look like a bluebird. So that's all I wanted to show you for that. And then you can try to do it when you get the link. And this is my bird, very different than his, kind of looser, less detailed. And believe me, I didn't like what I drew with pencil. I might have gave myself the oval for the body, round head, and I sketched real quick in some beak to beak, a round circle for the eye, and then put this tail feather and wing in there. And then I pick up my pen and I give myself more of these, details with the rough edges. And it's not even very detailed. It's just rough. I think rougher is better and just looks looser. So after I do the pen and ink for all those things, then I pick up my watercolors and I filled in with some color to make it look like a chickadee. So there again, I could have painted it blue and made it a bluebird, but it's the colors that are in the bird you're looking at that you want to show it. So that's a chickadee. Any questions about those helpful things for birds? Okay, this one is a bird shaped one I use in my other class that I do, but I think it also will help you to see. So another thing you can do if you want to practice shapes is to pick out a photograph in a magazine or on your iPad. So this is my electronic iPad program I'm using to do this. And it helps me just to, again, dissect the creature into shapes so that I can put it on my paper and get it to be the same proportions. So here's the chickadee, and I'm going to show you how I take, now this would be in pencil if I were doing it, on my paper, but I wanted you to see it with dark lines. So this is how I'm taking this bird and turning it into shapes that I would put on my paper to then be able to have the right proportions and the right placement for the wing, the tail feathers, the beak, the eyeball, and the feet. And see, I'm kind of doing it real quick here to give me the right placement. As I said, if this were pencil, then I would be more detailed and timely with my pen and ink and then fill it in with watercolor. So after you practice like that on a photograph, if you use tracing paper, you could do that, and that would help you to see it. If you use an iPad, I'll show you the app I use, but then you end up with this strange looking thing, but pretend that's pencil that would be what you then use to do your details, just like he did with his pen and ink or whatever. That gives you the right size, the right structure, and the right proportion. So let's step up to animals because they get a little more detail. The birds, you know, tend to be a little less complicated. I picked the fox out to demonstrate to you what I would do. You could do the same thing I did with the bird. You could put tracing paper over this and break it down into shapes if you wanted to. I just am getting better at seeing it in my brain and putting it on paper directly. Now you'll see it's not exactly the same position, but I'm out to get the proportions down so that it's going to look like a fox. So if I was going to trace over this to give myself shapes, I would have probably said, well, here's the oval body, and then it sort of has a round head, and there's a snout that's very boxy, and that gives me the idea of where the eyes need to be in reference to the snout and where his nose tip is. You have the ears, the triangle ears, and then you have this boxy area for the legs. And the hind leg is usually some sort of a round area in there. And then you have the tail that is also an oval. So those are the basic things that I would give, which you can see I kind of did over here similarly, for those shapes on paper to then get more detailed about. And when I have that, then, and this is usually about the detailed I get with my pencil. I don't get as like the bird guy did. I keep it this way. And then I pick up my pen and I start doing this because to me, this is getting the details down where I want them. And I do look at this picture so that I see where are the very darkest areas. Well, the edge of the tail, in here in the crevices and the insides of his belly. For sure, the legs are the darkest, blackest area to transfer into my drawing. His nose, eyes, inside his ear. And then I usually look at the contrast between colors to give myself some sort of guidance for where those separations will be. And the orange and the white, you know, are definite divisions of lighter and darker color. So I usually put some of them and maybe some hairline in there so that I see, you know, where that important part is to designate with color. So you can see my pencil lines are still there. And that's what I mean about, that's what I would erase then so it doesn't stand out, like here at the nose bridge and the body here and the legs. So I erase that and clean it up. And then in this case, I usually do use my watercolors, but in this case, I picked up my colored pencils and I did the color. And I look at the coloring here to kind of try to mimic the right coloring for a fox. Now, my interpretation of this fox is definitely different than the original photograph, but I'm out to get the impression in my own way the fox looks. You know, if I want a picture of a fox, I'll take a beautiful photograph. Often when I'm doing sketching and drawing, I want my interpretation and the more impressionistic feel for what I'm trying to give that picture than the actual photograph. Questions about any of that? Oh, sorry, I wanted to go back and forth. So yes, I think this picture's beautiful. I used to get really, really focused on trying to make my picture look exactly, my sketch, my painting look exactly like that. And I realized that a lot of the artists I like and appreciate and say, wow, they have their own style. They just do their own thing and it's not at all like a photograph. I mean, yes, we have those old world oil painters who did things that look like photographs, but we have so many fancy cameras and photograph things we can do now that I think it's just a nicer artistic thing to do your impression of it and your interpretation. So that's my take on why I make mine look a little looser. Any questions? Have you ever used watercolor pencils? Well, as a matter of fact, I have a set. I recently bought them. I found them at the bargain place in one of their stores I talked about. I haven't yet tried them because it seems like my watercolors are there with me when I'm sketching, and I really like to use a brush with the watercolor and just do that straight on quick. when I want to do pencils, I want it to look rougher, you know, that pencil quality. So when I pick up my pencils, that's what I want. I'm going to try them sooner or later, but I haven't tried them yet. I know some people like them because they can easily take them with them too. And I've heard they work really well too, so. All right, so we're going to look at some other resources. This little thing here, how to draw a rat, came up when I was looking at animals, and I thought that's really funny. It's cute. I'm going to send you that on a PDF so that you can practice at home, because I thought it works you really quickly through shapes, a little detail, a little more, and you have a rat. So that's what I'm going to send to you to be able to draw a rat, because nobody else would tell you how to draw a rat, right? I have a friend who has rats as pets, and he said they are so intelligent. So they get a bad rap, but they're supposedly pretty good. So I thought that would be something for you good to practice at home. So Pinterest is another one. If you look at Pinterest because you have an account, there are all kinds of resources for how to draw this or that. And I have a board that I have saved a lot of how to draw things to use just as reference for people when they're asking me. And so that's a good place to look. Not only that, but I also then save photographs. So these photographs I can look at in case I decide I want to draw them. And here you can see I have some chickadee ones. That's the one I showed you as an example, I think. But I use it for that. And then I use it because, like I said, if you look up how to draw this or that, you get a lot of other references for tutorials or videos or whatever there is out there. So Pinterest is one of those. Here's one on how to draw a peony, sunflowers. You know, it's got a lot of things there. That's one you could use. YouTube, I told you about YouTube. Once you put in how to draw whatever, you'll find hundreds of videos on that. And then I picked out these 3 blogs for you to use as reference. Each of them are a little different. This is Erica Lancaster, and she has a little bit of written about general things that are nice to know about sketching and drawing. Sometimes she does writings on the materials you use, you know, sketchbook, pencils, pens. So hers is like an all-around drawing resource for you to read about drawing. So that's one. And then this one is Craft Like a Granny. And the reason I like this is because she put together 100 best sketching blogs all in one place. So just on this one site, you can go through all these different links to different artists who give you their insights about drawing and what they do and how they do it and, you know, what makes them unique. So it's like a whole encyclopedia full of different other artists who you can read about. And then this one really reminds me just what I talked about with photographs and breaking them down into shapes. So this guy at arttutor.com does a breakdown of a pink flamingo and shows you how to take this photograph and how you then break it down into shapes to draw your own flamingo. So that's another one you can practice on and try. So I thought that was a good one for you to use. This is the iPad app that I talk about that I use. I only have an iPad mini. It's very old. It's not fancy. And I have a regular stylus, which is the type of rubber tipped or nylon tipped pointer you use. It's not an expensive Apple pen that costs over 100 or whatever, how much they are. These are styluses that cost like $4 or $5. And I use that and I play around with this app because it's very fun. It gives you all these tools to use. Now, it is free. You can upgrade and get some more advanced tools, which I did a long time ago, because this is like the main app I use on my iPad to have fun doing some art things. And here's a picture of some of the tools you get and different things you can do with watercolor and pen and ink. And it's just a fun app. So I thought I'd throw that in there. Somebody in one of my groups wanted to know, you know, what the name of it is. It is in Android. So it's called Sketches, and it's also on the Apple Store, and it's by Taya Sui. So those are the things you want to look at if you're looking for the app. Any questions? Okay, then we're going to summarize it. Nature provides many inspirations for drawing trees, plants, birds, and animals, and you can use basic shapes to simplify the object you want to draw. Squinting your eyes can help you see shapes and contrast while you're looking at those objects, and you can practice using photographs and tracing paper to dissect the picture into shapes. Drawings can begin as simple lines and shapes, but then they become more evolved by the lines you add, the contrast, and the details. So those are the main things we talked about to wrap up what we did. After this class, you will get an email with class notes and then a link that says give feedback. And if you click on it, you get this form. You rate the class from 1 or to 5 stars if you want to click on 5 stars to say it was really good for you. You can add comments and suggestions. Those are all things that are in that form, and I do look at them, and so do our Get Set Up people. So we appreciate if you take the time to share that. If you want to share your experience, you can do it these ways with a hashtag or an @GetSetUp, or sending it to Liz@GetSetUp. If you need more help, this is the link for asking for help, the same one you would send an email to if you want a recording of it. And then some related classes I found were how to take great photos with your iPhone or using digital photos with apps that you can really get creative with. And my next classes are the art of collage and torn paper, which is later on. And then doodling to de-stress is going to be on Wednesday. So Margaret, I'm reading your comment. Thank you. She said it was a good, clear presentation for I'm glad you found it useful. That's what I want it to be, so that you feel you can draw. That's the whole goal. When you get your email, there'll also be a place that you can share it with your friends and tell them about the classes. So that's a nice thing if you want to do that. This just tells you a little bit more about our community. That help at Get Set Up is useful for all these different things. If you want to host an interest group, suggest a new class, share your organization, such as if you have a local senior center you're part of and you want to tell Get Set Up about it. We are partnering with more and more community groups all the time. Is there anybody who needs help with the website information? One thing I like to show my groups is how easy it is to find things. So if you were looking for, say you were looking for my collage class, you just have to type in a word. So you could type in iPad, you could type in drawing. I typed in collage and there is only one. Some of them have, like if I put drawing in, there's 4 or 5 different classes that come up. So then I click on the art of collage. It takes me to the class information. If I were logged in as me, I'm not right now, it would say book this class, and I just click on it and it would schedule it for me and put me in the class, which it tells you there when it is. The other thing that's nice to see is this is for any class. You click on about the guide and whoever's teaching that comes up. And then if you want to see other classes being taught by that same guide, you just click on other classes and it'll show you what's coming up in those other areas, when they are, and you can book them right from there. So it's a really nice way to look up things. So say I look up iPad. Here's iPad Basics. And there's when that's being offered, and about the guide, it's Wendy. And you can see other classes Wendy teaches that are here. So it's a really nice way to kind of look at, if you like a certain teacher or a certain topic, you can look at those kinds of things. Any questions about anything else before we get ready to say goodbye? All right, you're welcome to everybody who said thank you. Watercolor class would be good. Yes, I've heard that before. Thank you, everybody, for your appreciation. And thank you for coming.
Christine.
Yes, Leona.
I took your last class, the collage class, and
yes.
I'm getting supplies, and I'm finding I don't have a lot of magazines to rip and tear. I don't know where to go. I guess ask Fred.
I stopped getting magazines delivered a few years ago too.
Exactly.
And so I would go, like I think I told you in the class, if you have a thrift shop, that's one place. The other place is if you have friends that get them, just ask them to save them for you. Thrift shops usually don't have magazines, but I know a lot of places get them donated to share with people in the hospital or something like that. So, you know, there are places that kind of accumulate them.
Right. I've been starting to save the circulars that come in the mail, some of the shiny ones. So used to throw those away. Now I'm hoarding them.
Good. Well, that's
but I
recycling.
enjoyed your class.
You're welcome, Leona. That's recycling. I like to recycle.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I enjoyed this class as well.
You're welcome, Leona. All right, everybody. Take care and have a great afternoon. And thanks for coming.